Hey everyone, so in this video, I wanted to talk about 6 common credit card myths that many people believe are true, but in reality, they're really just making some of us think about credit cards the wrong way. So what we're gonna do today is list off what each one of these myths are and then talk about why they're often misunderstood, because knowing the truth about these things can help us to be a little bit better off financially. All right, as always, let's just go ahead and jump right into the first myth here. Make sure to go ahead and tap the like button and subscribe down below to help support the channel. But the first myth is going to be that credit card points allow you to travel for free. Okay, so truth be told, credit card points can allow you to cover the cost of certain types of travel like flights and hotels if you redeem them the right way. However, what many people tend to forget is that those are not the only costs that the average person will have when traveling. As an example, on my most recent trip where I traveled down to Puerto Rico, my girlfriend and I managed to use our Chase Sapphire preferred cards along with the Chase points that we had saved up to completely cover the cost of our flights and our hotel stays. So from those points, we essentially got to fly and stay in a room that combined was going to be worth several $1,000s if we had paid in cash. So that was pretty cool to see, and we felt like we got a good deal. However, there are some other expenses that we have not yet factored into the total cost of this trip, such as the 5-day airport parking that cost us a little bit over $100. Then in Puerto Rico, we stayed at a resort, so we still had to pay for food and drinks there. Luckily, the prices were not as bad as I thought they would be, but still, it ended up costing us another few $100s. And then there's also the miscellaneous things that we wanted to do while we were down there on vacation, like ziplining and kayaking. Plus, we also had to pay cash to get to and from the airport. So all in all, this was far from a free trip, and that's going to be the case for a lot of people out there that use credit card points to go on vacation. It was a trip that was heavily subsidized by points, so that it only had to be a fraction of the cost had we paid in cash, but it was not free. And I think that's where a lot of people can get carried away with credit card points if they're not being careful. They might sign up for new credit cards that have high welcome bonuses, and then they might use those credit cards for everyday spending where they can earn some more points. Then they have all those points just sitting there in their credit card account, and they feel like they have to use them, otherwise they're just going to lose value over time. So they pick out a place to travel to, then they use those points to book a flight, a hotel, or both. And like I just talked about, if you're not factoring in those other costs of travel, or if you're underestimating what those costs will be, then you could quickly find yourself going over budget for your trip. So the point here with this first myth is that credit card points can be good, and they can greatly reduce your overall travel cost if you use them wisely. But budget for other travel expenses as well, because otherwise you might just be better off getting a cashback credit card setup instead of one that earns points. All right, next for credit card myth number 2, this is going to be another very important one to understand, and I also think it's the most common credit card myth of all time, and that is that carrying a credit card balance is going to help your credit score. So I kind of think that this myth got started from people just assuming that the credit bureaus want to see that we're actually using the credit that we've been given. And that is true. Using a credit limit that you've been given on a credit card responsibly is a good thing, but you absolutely do not have to be carrying a credit card balance from month to month to do so, and here's why. When a credit card issuer extends credit to you, under the terms and conditions, they expect to be paid back within a certain time frame. And in that time frame, if you do not pay back the full amount that you effectively borrowed from them by using a credit card, you're gonna have to pay them a little bit extra, which is called interest. But as long as you're paying back that full amount that you borrowed as your statement balance before the payment due date, that is still going to show that you're using the credit that you were given, but you will also not be charged any interest. Some people will use a credit card and then instead of paying it off in full before the payment due date, they only make the minimum payment or some other payment that is less than the overall statement balance. That way, any remaining amount actually carries over from one credit card statement to the next. But there is really no additional benefit to doing this when it comes to your credit score. The 2 most important credit score factors are on-time payment history, which basically means that you pay at least a certain amount by the payment due date, and credit utilization, which just means that you don't have a balance that is too high relative to the credit limit that you're given. These 2 combined factors make up about 65% of your credit score. So to take advantage of these things while also avoiding any interest charges, all you have to remember to do is pay off your credit card statement balance on time and in full every single month by the payment due date, and not just make the minimum payment. And you'll want to keep credit utilization or your credit card balance divided by your credit card limit at 10% or below on each card and across all cards combined. The lower the credit utilization, the better, but ideally you want to aim for somewhere in the low single-digit percentages. I've got plenty of other videos here on my channel talking about these things in much more detail, so I'll link those down in the description below, and you can check those out after watching this video if you're interested. All right, moving along to credit card myth number 3, and with this one, it really is going to depend on how you view this, but that myth is going to be that you should close credit cards that you do not use anymore. I would say that if you have a no annual fee credit card, especially especially one that you've had open for a very long time, then I would say there's really no point in closing it because it's not costing you anything extra each year to keep it open. And because it's free for you to continue having that card, you might as well do so since it's only going to help with your age of credit over time. So age of credit is only going to account for about 15% of our credit scores. And then, like I said before, payment history and credit utilization are the other two main factors that we want to focus on as well. So my oldest credit card accounts are no annual fee cards, and I just keep them open and use them maybe once or twice a year for a small purchase here or there. That way they stay active and I can take advantage and benefit from the age of those accounts at no additional cost to me. Now, if you're paying an annual fee for a credit card and it's no longer bringing you enough value to justify paying that fee, then in that situation, you might want to consider closing that card. See if you can downgrade to a no annual fee credit card first, or call up the issuer and ask if they'll give you a retention offer or at least waive the annual fee. But if you do decide that closing that credit card is what you want to do, it is not going to damage your credit score like some people might think. Actually, as long as you close that credit card account while in good standing, that's going to remain on your credit report for the next 10 years and continue to positively impact your age of credit while also still showing good on-time payment history. The downside to closing a credit card though is going to be that you'll lose the credit limit that was available on that card. That means that your overall credit utilization percentage could actually increase if your combined spending and balances across your other cards remains relatively unchanged. Maybe instead of having combined balances of $1,000 across combined credit limits of $20,000 for a 5% utilization, now you have $1,000 in balances and credit limits of $15,000 after closing a card, so now your utilization is slightly higher at 6.7%. So the impact might not be that much here or depending on your situation, but it is something to consider and something to be aware of, because if your credit utilization does increase by too much, then it might negatively impact your credit score. The main takeaway here from this myth is that credit cards with no annual fee should just remain open for the most part. That way it'll help with your age of credit over time. And then credit cards that do have an annual fee might have other options instead of closing them. But if you do decide to close a credit card, as long as it's in good standing, the impact should be relatively minor and not as bad as some people might believe. And this leads me to credit card myth number 4, which also has to do with the impact to your credit score. And that myth is going to be that missing a credit card payment is going to hurt your credit score. Now, this myth is true, but not entirely. So let me explain how missed payments work. So when a card's billing cycle comes to an end, you're going to be left with a statement balance, which essentially just reflects the amount of spending that you did during that cycle. This will be shown on a credit card statement along with a payment due date, which is going to be about 3 weeks after your statement closing date. Now, you're also going to see on the credit card statement a minimum payment amount. And that essentially is just the smallest amount possible that you can pay to still have that payment amount reported as being on time. Of course, this minimum payment amount should just be ignored, and instead you should focus on the statement balance and pay that by the payment due date. By doing this, you're going to avoid carrying over any additional amounts to the next credit card statement, and you will not be charged any interest. But if you fail to make that payment by the payment due date, most people believe that that is going to immediately damage your credit score. However, the truth is that late payments are not reported to the credit bureaus until at least 30 days after that payment due date, so you have some time to make at least that minimum payment if you realize it within that 30-day period. Again, pay it off in full. Do not make just the minimum payment unless that's all that you can afford. But if you find yourself struggling to pay off credit cards in full, then I would say to avoid credit cards altogether until you find yourself in a better financial situation. Now, once that 30-day period is up after the payment was due, that is when you're going to start to see that negative impact to your credit score, because remember that on-time payment history is the most important factor to your score. So after 30 days, you want to make that payment as soon as you can, because being 31 days late is better than being 60 days late, and that is going to be better than being 90 days late. So the sooner you can make that payment, the better. Now, I do want to say that you should not be relying on this 30-day period after the payment due date when it comes to paying off your credit card, because that's just not a good habit to get into. The issuer is still going to likely charge you a late fee if you don't make that payment by the payment due date, but if you accidentally forget and then you're late on that payment, but you realize it and you call up your issuer, they probably will be able to waive the fee for you if it's just a one-time thing. So hopefully that clears things up a little bit about missed payments. Again, on-time payment history and having a perfect on-time payment history is the simplest way that anyone can help their credit score. Just make those payments on time by the due date and in full by paying the statement balance, and that'll help your score while also avoiding interest charges. All right, moving along to credit card myth number 5, and this is going to be another very common misconception, and that is going to be that applying for new credit cards will also hurt your credit score. This one is going to be mostly false as well, because it can be a bad thing if you're applying for credit cards the wrong way, but overall I do think the positives of getting new credit cards are going to outweigh the negatives if you do this responsibly, so let me explain what that means. So at first, applying for a new credit card can cause your credit score to drop by maybe a few points or so, and that is simply because a hard inquiry is done when you apply for most credit cards. A hard inquiry is done when somebody pulls your credit information to potentially extend you some new or additional credit. And this makes sense, right? If you want to apply for new credit to essentially borrow more money, this could be seen as being a little bit risky until you prove that you know how to handle this additional or new credit by paying it back in a responsible way. Now, luckily, once you have this credit from a new credit card, you start making on-time payments, you keep credit utilization low, and you use that credit card in other ways that are responsible and the right way of using a credit card, that is going to outweigh any of that small negative impact to your credit score from that hard inquiry. And after only a short period of time, the effects from that hard inquiry are not going to matter much at all. After 24 months, the inquiry is even going to fall off of your credit report. By having this new credit limit, that is going to be added on to your existing credit limits, which could actually then decrease your overall credit utilization if your average spending and credit card balances remain relatively unchanged. So pretty much the exact opposite effect of closing a credit card like I talked about before. Now, the impact of hard inquiries and new credit on your credit score is really all going to depend on you, your credit history, and your overall credit profile. If you're new to credit, then applying for a new credit card or applying for several new credit cards very quickly is going to have more of a negative impact to your credit score compared to mine with my 6 or 7 years of credit history. And someone with 20 years of credit history with other loans mixed in there as well who applies for a new credit card is going to feel even less of an impact than me. The world of credit cards and credit is something that takes time and patience, so just be aware of that going into it. But the takeaway from this myth that applying for new credit cards will hurt your credit score is that it can, but it likely will not as long as you're doing so responsibly. The benefits from things like potentially decreasing your credit utilization and also getting on-time payments with this new credit card, combined with any sign-up bonuses and other benefits that a new credit card can offer, all those things can make getting a new credit card worth it in many cases. Again, I always want to reinforce this here on my channel, but the only way that all this is true is if you're paying off your credit cards on time and in full every single month. You also have to treat those credit cards like cash and only use them if you have the money set aside to pay off that balance in full whenever you want. I also think it's really helpful to be self-aware of your spending habits through some sort of a budget. That way you don't overspend with those cards. Okay, now finally, for the last credit card myth that I wanted to talk about here, I kind of saved the best for last because this seems to be the most controversial credit card myth out there, and that is that credit cards get you to spend more money. This is an argument that has been popularized by Dave Ramsey, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I like to follow him as well because I enjoy seeing the way that he helps people to get out of bad debt. The argument here is that when you're using a credit card to pay for something instead of cash, you're going to feel less pain because you're not actually exchanging anything like you would be with physical cash. It's just digital numbers on a screen, so that in turn could get you to spend more money. And if you overspend, that could easily outweigh any of the cash back or points that you might earn by using a credit card. Now, this myth is something that I believe is much more complicated than just being true or false because it is 100% a behavioral argument with how people react when it comes to spending. And no two people are exactly alike. We're all born into different situations, so we grow up around different people. We have different perspectives on the world and how the world works. That leads to different risk tolerances and different habits. There's so many ways that we're all different that you cannot definitively say that every single person out there will spend more money by using a credit card. For me personally, this is a myth because I keep track of all the numbers across my different accounts. I hate seeing those numbers go down as I'm spending money or as I'm paying off a credit card balance. I even hate seeing my accounts when the market's down. If anything, cash actually feels more like found money to me because I grew up in this digital age. I feel like I would be likely to spend more money by using cash compared to credit cards just because of the way that I budget and keep track of everything by looking at my credit card statements. This is a topic that I'm really interested in exploring in the future here on this channel because I don't think that I'm completely right, and I don't think Dave Ramsey is completely right either. It all varies from person to person, so I don't really think you could say with one true statement every single person out there should avoid credit cards because you'll spend more money. But for the average person that does follow Dave and his teachings for getting out of bad debt, I do think that for those people, staying away from credit cards can be actually a good thing, and I can agree with him there. But for people like myself and for anyone watching this and other similar channels where we try to learn more about personal finance and how to really take advantage of financial tools like credit cards, they can be a very good thing as long as you're using them responsibly. It all starts with understanding the basic fundamentals of how to use credit cards the right way. So if you want to learn more, then go check out the other videos that I'll put on the screen right now. That should have a lot more detailed information that I think you'll find useful. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to go ahead and subscribe down below and drop a like as well if this video was useful. I hope that you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.